Right. Okay. I think we're there. Okay. So make yourself comfortable in the chair. Remember, even though you're probably inside, I doubt that anybody's sitting in their garden watching this. It's still quite chilly, and we're just habitually in this kind of weather, kind of pull in. You know, every time you open the door or go to a colder part of the house, we notice that. So take that into account. It's always going to be tighter to move and so on and so forth. Give yourself more time, a little bit more attention to what's going on in your body. And as always with Tai Chi, you know, the first question should always be, regardless of how long you've been doing this, you know, what is appropriate at the moment. So rest your feet down. Try and have some of your weight forwards. Just be careful of your back. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. The part of your chest. Nice and light on your belly. Finally, move my glasses down. Tapping is a good way, obviously, of sort of warming your body up physically, but also it does help with this process of bringing your attention into your body. Some groups, and especially if you know, if it's a group where there might be kind of high levels of poor concentration or anxiety, I would use the tapping at the start as a way of beginning this process of whatever you call it, centering, grounding, dropping into your body, and so on and so forth. And it's something that we want to try and maintain and to cultivate throughout all of the movements. And it's really fundamental to what we're doing. But now, feet out, dropping back in the chair, and that awareness of your body that is sort of aided by the tapping can be used to give you this sense of sinking into the chair, what it's like to let your weight drop loose away from your body, as it were. The significance of the chair and all of that. And how do you begin to feel when, say, for instance, some of the tightness in your chest or your belly is starting to dissolve or to melt away? This continues the process of focusing, of centering. And you could maybe be aware of your breathing, for instance, or any sensations in your fingers. This is not the only aspect of Tai Chi, but it's an essential part that if we're going to cultivate movements and start to change things in our body, we have to be very aware of what our starting point at any particular moment is. And coming back to the upright position, just getting a bit more time with the. I'm sitting quite forward on the chair as I tend to do, and that gives me, I feel, the maximum chance of actually being able to feel that my legs are in a supportive role. If I was to lift my feet up, I'd just roll out the chair. I'm not going to demonstrate that for you. It wouldn't be much fun. A friend of mine had a good idea. He said he said he would say to his groups, his seated groups, he said, next week, bring a £20 note along and put it under your foot at this point. And I'm going to come around and give a little tug on each 20. And if anything comes out, it's mine. I can't do that online, of course, but you get the idea. If it is causing your back to ache, then sit back. You won't get quite the same feeling in your legs, most likely, but it's better than moving your back. So your feet, your legs, floor, of course, the chair, your hips, lower back, buttocks are all part of the sort of base, if you like, the foundation for the rest of the practice. Your upper back supporting the front of your body. And if you can, just this sense of your skeleton, initially the skeleton, and gradually a wider area spreading out from the skeleton, supporting the whole of your body. For vertebrates, and the definition of a vertebrate is that it has an internal skeleton, an internal support mechanism. So as an internal art, Tai Chi is very compatible with that understanding. And yet we've often developed the habitual sort of tightening in our shoulders and our chest, almost as though we're trying to develop a hard shell. So a softening, a releasing feeling all the way through the body, that stronger feeling within. I tend to think of it as a denser feeling. If you were to get a balloon or a bottle full of water or something like that and push your finger in, you would meet more and more resistance, but it would never be hard. Another example, this is a classic image from Tai Chi, is if you get a block of wood, or you can get a ball, and you push it down into water, again, you meet more and more resistance. And what happens then is the ball or the block of wood gets pushed up. The buoyancy of the water does that. And so we want to apply these ideas to the pull of gravity working through our body, that in releasing that tightness in, say, our shoulders that we felt was necessary to hold us up, we discover through that releasing feeling that there is that almost buoyancy, almost buoyant feeling coming up from legs and hips and from the ground. So it's quite tricky, and there's always a feeling of risk involved in this, I think, which is why I use the reclining position. It's the most comfortable, the most supported position to actually help us become aware of that process, that dynamic. The downward movement and the upward movement generates a flow of energy. And once we become aware of that, we have a sense of what to look for in the upright stance, in the chair, and later when we come to the standing. Now just slowly turning your head. And then hands in front of your shoulders, just touching your shoulders lightly, circling your elbows around. Try and gradually get a sense for how much space there is for smooth movement within. when we start to work with that idea, then we find that the flow of the movement, flow of the exercises it just comes as a natural outcome of that internalized flow. But if you're straining for the movement within your body, then it's quite difficult to maintain, to develop in the first place, but certainly to maintain, to sustain the external flow. And then going forwards. It comes from inside out. And then winding your arms around. So with a movement like this, for instance, you can do it in a way that's sort of like stiffening, you're fighting against your own body, or you can just keep it nice and loose and see how much movement is there. It's good to work with the idea that you want to extend your range of movement. The movement itself will do that for you. As your body warms up, as the effect of the movement to erode and to dissolve resistance increases, so that there will be more space for you. Go back the other way. We often use the image in Tai Chi of moving through water, but we could also have the idea of moving like water, finding the path of least resistance. And in particular, I think, you know, if there's a part of your body that's a bit stiff or a bit tight, maybe it's a bit painful, pulled a muscle or something, or a bit stiff in your back. That idea that the movement has the same effect on those areas as water flowing over the soil might have, of just gradually, as I say, eroding, dissolving the pathway. And I think that's quite a nice image. It's not the only way that we work with those areas, but it's a good starting point because it's very gentle, a very organic process. Hands down to your stomach and just winding around. I think we've already done this. It's an interesting exercise to think about what's moving your arms. Feel the expansion and contraction in the chest and your upper back. Starting to get a sense for the connections in the body. Now, let your arms rest again and start to rock forwards on the bones at the base of the pelvis. And again, you feel your back expanding as you go forwards, contracting as you go back. And more subtle, more difficult to pick up, I think, but sense of expansion, contraction, alternating in the front of your body. And then there's a small adjustment here in the middle of your body. You turn a little bit. So now more of your weight going towards one side. When you do go forwards and you feel your weight in the appropriate leg, just give a moment to yourself to register the distinction between this leg and the other leg. There is weight in the other leg, but there's more in this leg, and this would be described as being the leg that was full of the weight, as opposed to empty with the other leg. And in the standing, that's just between the legs, but in the seated exercises, that transition from full to empty also works in regard to your hips, between your hips and your feet. Turn the other way. And the thing that is really controlling it in this exercise, where it goes, is the angle, the alignment of that central part of your body between hips and waist. And then turning, going all the way around, and seeing if you can just feel the change. As you go forward, your weight's more in one leg that's full, and then you move across, and that leg becomes full. You go back, filling up in one of the hips, turning, feeling that movement across that, filling into the opposite hip, and so on and so forth. And as we become more familiar with this, we want that transition from full to empty to be the thing that moves our shoulders. To start off with, it's the other way around. But we want to just try and find that deeper source for the move. Go back the other way. And that will probably mean that, going back to what I was saying about the skeleton and that stronger, denser feeling within the body, we will start to move more from that. And then coming back to the center, step out with one foot, put the heel and then the toes down, planting the foot forwards, back. So it's a general kind of guide, I suppose you could say. As we become more experienced at Tai Chi, we tend to generate the movement more from within outwards. When we start to learn, and sometimes still when we're learning something new or investigating a movement that we think that we know, it may still be the other way around. Change sides. This is not an attempt to belittle, to disregard what happens externally, but more to give it a context where the movement is generated from within and expressed through the external. So coming back to the basic position, hands down by your sides again, we're going to be using this rotation, the next exercise, in combination with the movement of the weight. As we've discovered, actually both of these movements have a connection to what's happening in our back and in, say, our chest, or maybe our sides as well, wherever you happen to feel it. So it becomes one action, one movement with our upper body, and because we're moving our weight, then it becomes one movement with the whole of our body. So start with the weight back, hands turning forwards, and then bird folds its wings. So there may be times when we bring a particular focus of attention to the movement, focusing more on the weight or what's happening in our back. That's a valid part of the practice, but it's not this. I can say it's not the end result. And it occurred to me, I'm not sure if there is an end result to this. I've certainly never reached the end of the practice, but certainly one of the outcomes, and one of the most important outcomes that develops, is summed up in this phrase from the Tai Chi writings that when one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. In other words, your whole body is engaged in one way. And leaving the hands facing backwards, move your weight back, let your arms follow. Fisherman casting it. So that pattern of movement from inside out is really something we want to try and develop for all of the movements. Again, this is not to ignore what's happening externally. But it means that we're not forcing a movement with, say, our arms, but rather using our arms and our hands to create a shape to express the movement that's already there. That shape creation is partly physical, obviously, you know, what you're doing with your arms and your hands, and partly to do with your mind and your intent. One of the reasons for establishing a set of movements as we do in these sessions, and one of the reasons for starting with the more straightforward exercises, is to give ourselves a chance to bring our intent into process, to draw on our memory of what happened the last time we did the exercise. And then rolling the ball in. And your hands palm in, draw your elbows apart, feel the opening and closing, and chest and upper back. Pigeon spreads its wings. One more time. Now change into pushing wave. So your elbows still come out, but your hands stay in front of your hips. So more subtle, but there's still that sense of movement, expansion and contraction in upper chest and back. So although the image of the movement is a pushing, it's pushing with the whole of yourself, not just with your arms. Weight is moving, chest opens and closes, back opens and closes, and so on and so forth. Now this time, hands come back and you roll your fingers into a hollow fist. Your elbows don't go out here, nor do you want your elbows to go behind. You lose the physical, mechanical connection. So what happens is your elbow comes back towards your hip, and a lot of the movement gets absorbed into this spiraling, rotating quality, like a spring. If this was a spring and you pushed on the end of it, it would say rest against your shoulder and kind of bunch up a little bit, and then it would release. But going back to that idea of the inner strength, that denser feeling, again, if you get the block of wood and you push it down into water, then suddenly take your hand away, it goes, it bobs up. And in the same way, you're supposed to creating pressure here that then pushes out. At the end of the movement, open your fingers, turn your hands out, winding out and back. The rhythm in Tai Chi follows this pattern of expansion, contraction, reaching out, drawing back. Process that's labeled sort of generically, as it were, as yin yang, yang the expanding, yin the contracting. Or maybe yang could be forwards or yin back. There aren't set qualities, there aren't set sort of lists of things that are yin or are yang, except in very specialist circumstances like Chinese medicine. When you come back this time, turn your hands palm down, turn in the center of your body, then tilt forwards, bring your hands around in a smooth circle, just polishing the table. Still aware in the back of your mind of those transitions. Where is the fullness in the body at any particular point in this? One more time. Coming back to your own center. Turn your hands palm up. A gentle push down through feet and hips, expanding upwards through the upper part of your body. The downward movement in your hips and your feet gives rise to the name of the movement, which is rooting down. And it shows us how any movement that we make in Tai Chi, because there's going to be there's going to be a series of these vertical movements, how they all begin somehow in our feet, in the root of the movement, rather than in our upper body. And then change into the wild goose, hands out to your sides. And then going forward, just to let your hands swing in front of your knees, coming back into your hips and again pushing up. We want to develop that habit of moving from the ground, using our feet, using the rooting down, using the transfer of the weight to create the energy for the movement, both in Tai Chi and, to be honest, in our daily lives. It's a much more stable way of moving. It's one that is less likely to create a straining in the upper part of your body. And so these exercises with the emphasis on the idea of rooting down can become very valuable. One more time. This time staying upright, letting your hands drop down and feeling that gentle push down through one side of your body, going into dragon plucks the stars from the sky. One more time. And then pushing in two directions, bringing hands around in front, expanding, lengthening through your back. Last time, as you push your hands out, this time extend one leg, the heel goes on the ground, knees still slightly bent, scooping the sea, looking at the sky. Very careful, it's a strong movement in the back of your legs and up past your spine and your back. And then from this rear position, again, a hollow fist in both hands, grasping the tiny seals. Small. Changing over. Scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Now, bring your feet back to the basic position and bring your weight into your right hip. This one. So that's the full hip. You go forwards into your left leg, the transition from empty to full. Go back into your right hip. Turn to your left. So now you make the transfer to your left hip and forwards into your right hip. Go back. Try that again and just feel not just what's happening in your weight, that should be in the back of your mind, but how this affects your upper body. Now come across into your right hip again, hold the ball, right hand on top, left hand underneath. And once again, your arms will express that movement in the exercise, part of the wild horse's mane. The left leg is your full leg. Going back, now it's your right hip. You turn, it transfers to your left hip, forwards, diagonally. Right leg becomes the weighted leg. And then let your hands rest. Now, once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder, your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. And then the belly. And the next. push your heels up. So you just get a little bit of energy and life back into the muscles of your legs. And then moving them around in a circle. The other way, I haven't done so already. Good, okay. Now standing. So one thing that is very clear to us when we stand up is with all of our legs. It doesn't mean that other parts of the body aren't still engaged. So your legs and feet obviously support your body. So the first thing we need to do is to establish the stance, feet are hip width apart, toes pointing forwards or very slightly turned out. Our weight goes slightly forwards, almost as though we're about to take a step. But instead of letting that happen, we also allow our hips to sink back as they did in the chair. This is the primary foundation. Our back supports the front of our body. And both of these things mean that it's more likely that we're going to start to release some of that tightness in the upper part of our body. We come more into line with the pull of gravity. We all of us have habits of leaning, tilting over in one direction or another for all sorts of reasons. But this is in part remedied with this adjustment of the pelvis here. You know, if say your habit is to lean forwards, which is quite common, then if I exaggerate, you see when my hips go back, my head comes up. So we also drop our center of gravity, and the combination means that there is less need for strain, particularly in the upper part of the body. It doesn't just go away magically, but we take away some of the kind of conditions that may cause it. And that's when we start to feel also this inner strength, the skeleton as I described it. And again, you know, we want to remain aware of that and see if we can move from that. So using the exercise, rooting down, wild goose, parting the cloud to standard versions in a little sequence, just sinking down, bring your hands around so you're cradling the ball. So pushing up through the center of your body and settling down. Turn your hands out. Again, pushing up, feel the movement expanding upwards and outwards with the wild goose. And again, settling down. And then from your feet through the middle of your body and up and out, parting the clouds. Again, last time. Foot forwards, maintaining the width of your step, and again transferring the weight, feeling the transition from full to empty, and making use of that change in awareness, moving from the ground, moving from your feet, moving from within, but particularly from your feet with this exercise. As I've demonstrated before, you know, if you have a stack of boxes or something like that, and you need to shift them, then if you push on the top box, everything topples over. If you push on the bottom, it's more likely to remain stable. And so when we do this, and when we've developed that habit of moving from the ground and the awareness that goes with it, it has a profound effect on our stability as we move. And that, again, in addition to the physical sinking of your weight, it explains much of why Tai Chi is so good at helping us improve our stability. And our awareness is a key part of this. It doesn't come automatically to us. We tend to be upper body orientated, front of the body orientated. So we have to make a conscious, deliberate change in awareness. It's almost like we make a decision. I'm going to move from the ground. And then just raising the toes as you go back, and then when you're in the front leg, your heel. Both of those accompanied by a feeling of slightly stronger feeling of sinking through your hips, and more of your weight going into the full leg. From the side, hopefully, can't really see myself, I have to turn my head. You see that my basic posture is still upright. What I don't want to do, and again, it's a very common habit, is this. Now I'm leaning backwards and I'm going to lose the alignment of the body. The same thing, we don't want to lean forwards. And then we can just bring 1 foot in. Just place the toes down. And when you do that, give yourself a moment to just check your posture, hips level, so on and so forth, weight dropping. And shake out. So it's a relatively short step and it's slow. If we were going for power, length, speed, then yes, we might well engage the upper body again, as a runner does. They use their arms, they use their whole body. But if that's all we ever do, once again, we're becoming very upper body orientated. So this is almost a kind of corrective thing. So try that with your other foot forwards. And remember, balance isn't the issue here. What we're interested in Tai Chi is stability. Balance has a different meaning in the context of Tai Chi. When we're in line with the pull of gravity, when our body's in line with itself, when we've dropped our center of gravity down, we become more stable. We only need to think about balancing, as into a balance on a tightrope or something like that, when we've lost that stability. Raising the toes and your heel. Notice whether you're habitually sort of straining a little bit back or shoulders or even your arms to do this. Just recognize that it isn't necessary to do that. It doesn't mean you're going to magically stop doing it, but it's the start of the process. And stepping in. A few steps through, forwards or backwards. Notice, are you sort of like holding your arms stiff or whatever? Ask yourself why. There's nothing there to hold on to, unless you're by the wall or something like that. But even then, you wouldn't want your arms stiff. So these things can just hang loose. And then going back. Again, in some circumstances, we might use our arms. Again, especially if we were, say, running for the bus or something like that. But that's something that we can begin to, in a sense, add on to what we're doing here. So what we're practicing really when we do the stepping is what we might think of as the heart, the center of the stepping process, which we could then learn to extend out in much the same way as I was talking about with all of the exercises. Have your right foot forward. So that leaves the upper body freer for the patterns of the various exercises that we do. And with that freedom comes the sense of flow. So start on your back foot, just doing a few rounds of fisherman cast and net, most simple of all the exercises, and yet we can still find ourselves kind of doing this. And you can see, actually, I didn't mean to do that, but as soon as I do this, you see how my heel's coming off the ground. So we want the arms to express what's going on in the rest of the body, as always in Tai Chi. They extend out from the body, not leading the body. Overextending is a common cause of falling. Or if not falling, at least kind of maybe injuring yourself, pulling a muscle or something like that. So we gradually become aware of how far we can extend out without that pulled muscle. This time, come back, and again, a small turn in the center of your body. Guide your arms into the movement. Wind blows the willows. Good. Try that on the other side. So your left foot forwards, starting with fisherman cast and net. It's almost as though we feel out, not a tentative feeling, a confident feeling, but just recognizing when we're approaching that boundary beyond which we're going to stiffen up. And again, it's reasonable to look for an extension of that boundary in various ways, through the releasing process, through the movement itself, as I described before. But we don't want to sort of overdo it. And then wind blows the willows. This time when you go either into your front or your back leg, depending on which direction you're going in, bring your foot in again, just rest your toes there, check your posture, take the step, go forwards or backwards, turn, bring the foot in. This is dragonfly skims the water. And if you're comfortable with this, you bring the foot in and then just raise up. Hips dropping back to counter the effect of your leg going up. You could argue that it's the feeling of your hips dropping back that creates the downward movement that leads to your legs going up. And then stepping in the other direction. If you imagine from your hips up to your shoulders and over the top of the shoulders and down towards your leg, there's a couple of little cords, almost like a kind of on a window blind. It's the downward movement in your hips that will bring your foot up. One more time. And bring your feet back. Shake it. Lovely. Go back to your chair. So coming back to the sitting position, all of these things, the expansion and the contraction, the sinking down and so on and so forth are, I was going to say temporary. Temporary is not quite the right word. They will come and go. So one of the key things we learn in Tai Chi, and this includes that focusing of our attention, is that there's a rhythm, there's a flow to these things. In fact, it's quite good that our attention reaches out. It's quite good that our arms can extend out and so on and so forth. But we want to build in this returning process. Hence, the final exercise, embrace tiger, return to the mountain. Start by pushing your arms out, but feeling the pull of gravity working through your body, your hips, back, shoulders and arms. Gradually bringing your body, your attention back to your center and the ground. So if we can be aware how gravity is working through our body, as well as that extension outwards, we have the means to return. One more time. And then and open your eyes. Thank you very much, everybody, as always.